from any other source. Our family life, unfortunately, is brittle, and many people don't go to church again, don't go to Sabbath school or Sunday school. We can always point and say, is the home should be doing it, or the church should be doing it, or the government should be doing it. The one place we reach all of our children is at the school. And the most impressionable aspect of the schooling is the early childhood aspect. Red Goodon, address us.
Thank you very much, Minister. You see, he was Minister of Education, and for us public servants, once a minister, always a minister. Our bishops that are with us, sisters and brothers, I am very excited to be here today. You'll notice I'm not on the program, but so it is by chance that I get this few minutes to quickly share with you my thoughts. I'm consultant now to the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce for 5 years. I retired as Permanent Secretary in 2012. And for 12 years, we have been trying to implement something called ISO 9001 Quality Management System in that ministry. And today, we have auditors in there working to audit the ministry. I was the one who has been championing all these years. And I left that and come to share with you today on values and attitudes, because I think it is the greatest challenge we have in the country today. I was so happy to hear Archbishop and Sister Grace Baston spoke so much about great values and attitudes, because having worked in government for nearly 40 years, up to the highest level, except minister, I came to the conclusion, Minister, that there's no new legislation that we can bring to Parliament, no new policy that we can formulate at Cabinet that is going to transform this country. It has to be transformed through the people. The people, we say now that the most valuable resource, the development of a nation, is influenced by two factors. The natural resource endowment of the country, we can't change that. The quality of the people. The quality of the people can be decomposed, as I was sharing with two colleagues this morning, into two elements. One, the core values. The core values for our IT people is very much the operating system. It is the principles that drive everything else. If you're honest, respectful, disciplined, hardworking, educated, selfless, political leader, you will be a good leader. In a company, in a family, wherever it is. Those core values, once those core values are good, we can overlay anything else on them. We have a good quality citizen, good quality human being, will be able to compete with the best in the world. Today, the reason why we aren't able to compete and our trade deficit is so high, our exchange rate constantly running away, is because the core values are wrong. So people don't value things like education, boys don't go to school, they underperform, and it is just a compounding problem. When I recognized that years ago, I committed myself that I was going to focus on something called values and attitudes. And that was after I go the world over, listen to people talk, read what academics write, and came to the conclusion, right back to basics. Fix the core values of the children at the early childhood level. And we fix them for life. If we can get the core values, the respect which Sister Grace spoke about, the honesty, the self-discipline, obedience to rules, Selflessness. Treat other people sometimes better than how we treat ourselves. We have a totally different human being. For me, the early childhood, forget about the ones and twos and threes and so on. They can learn that at any age. Teach them the core values, and you have a powerful, wonderful human being that will excel afterwards. What we have done, we have, with the blessing and strong support of Minister Tweeds while he was Minister of Education, we got the Grace Kennedy Foundation, Jamaica Building Society, and other companies, the Ministry of Education too, to fund over a 2-year program, a consultation involving over 300 principals from early childhood institutions, over principals, deans of discipline, guidance counselors from over 30 high schools and primary schools in addition. And they came up with 7 basic core values. Many of them are covered in Sister Grace's presentation. Minister, I would like an opportunity for us to integrate those into the education system for the Catholic schools. If we do that, we can be a model for the others. Respect for self, others, and things like the environment, anything that is important to people. My colleague was speaking about it this morning. Respect for self and others, honesty, self-discipline, obedience to rules, laws, regulations, rules made by companies, rules made by teachers, schools, obedience to rules. And when some rule not right, there's a way to fix it. Selflessness, that is the Christian part, where we try to treat other people better than how we treat ourselves sometimes. Give to other people the best. Keep the second for yourself. Something which some people don't like, it's called monogamy. Sister Howell spoke about the family. We don't have family anymore. We need to have family. If we teach our children and instill in them the importance of these core values, as I heard this morning that the Brother X was saying that he used to go to Catholic church earlier, school, and he smelled the incense. And in his latter years, he remembered it and he gravitated back to it. Anything you plant in that mind from it is early, it's going to stay there, Your Grace. And it's going to blossom later on. I am asking you, focus on that. Let me tell you something. When those children are young, their brain will sponge up everything. You know, I have 3 children there. Thank you very much. And you know, and I'll share this with you. I feel a little embarrassed to say it, but bear with me. I have 3 children, they're all medical doctors. And I would tell you that they're not the brightest children. But you know what happened? I worked an extremely busy life for many years. Leave office 9 o'clock, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and work until 7 o'clock, get a shower, reach to work, and it goes on for many years. Weekends is my weekend. Children homework must be done before. I make sure I spend at least an hour every morning with my children from they were young. One of them, when she was 4 years old, she could multiply you 8 digits by 8 digits. By the time she was in about grade 3, grade 4, she could run your linear programming model. You know why? The home. Let me tell you something. The home is the most powerful. And most parents have more, especially at the early childhood level, have more to teach the children than they can absorb. You don't have to be trained and educated. Some of these very basic things. So get the parents to be involved. Teach them, have classes for them, so that they understand what you're teaching so they can help the children. It's not rocket science. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we can do it. I call you the social engineers of the society. This is the foundation, Minister, on which everything is built. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Reg. I hope you're getting the picture of what this is all about. Jamaica is not going to move anywhere unless we fix the early childhood system, unless we have a new covenant between the home and the school. Yes? Those are the requirements. You are the factors. You may feel that it's too much for you. Work with what you have. That's a message of change of within. Pauletta Chevannes, please join us. Welcome her, please.
And you have to make sure the camera can, so others can see. Oh, that is why it has to be here. Will the camera work?
Okay. Oh, I see. All right. Oh, okay. Fine. Great. Okay. Oh, thank you. Margaret, I would like you up here with me. Margaret, no, you're not shy. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, yes. I have always taught in high school, always. And I've always said that when I think of the work done in early childhood, maximum respect. Maximum respect all the time. I could never teach at that level. I don't have the capacity to teach at that level. And so, the people who do that work, enough respect. Or this morning, or this afternoon, I called Margaret here because both of us are involved in this project. This is a project called Change from Within, and it started in the 1990s. How did this project start? It started at the grassroots level. Here were schools, two primary and two high schools. None of the principals in those schools were aware of what the other was doing. None of them. None of us was aware of what the other was doing. But what we were faced with, we were all from inner city schools, and we were faced with a problem of lack of self-confidence. We know the education system. And we know that schools in the inner city are schools that many people do not give any respect for. And I'm serious when I say the word respect. Many people believe that children who live in those environments and who attend those institutions will come to nothing. Because, one, they live below, in many instances, the poverty line. They come from down south. They are not exposed, because I tell you, working in the inner city, we have found that many of the children have never. I worked, for example, in at the time that I was involved in the project, I worked in Charlie Smith High School, which is in what we call jungle, concrete jungle, Jonestown. Arnett Gardens. And many of those children never ever left that community. I remember taking a set of them to a chess competition at the Pegasus Hotel. And all I could hear was up and down in the elevator, calling me, where are you? Are you on this floor? Are you the first they had ever been into an elevator? And on the Monday morning, when I arrived at school, the gate man had the gate locked. He said, Miss, you have to park outside. Why? The children who had been to that hotel had for the first time seen people playing lawn tennis. So, on the Monday morning, a group of them set up a barrier in the schoolyard and they were playing lawn tennis. So, the principal couldn't enter, the gate locked. They had to park and go inside because you were going to disrupt the tennis match. It's the first they had ever seen. And when we spoke to them, they said this is the first they had seen it. But in no time, they picked up on it and started to practice. And we had to start something from that. And that is just to give you an example of what the change from within is. So then, what we were doing was focusing on building self-esteem in our children. That is what we were doing. And we were doing it by focusing first off on their interests. What is it that interests these children? What is it that makes them click? And in my instance, it was football. If you had a football match in Arnett Gardens during school time, school locked. Children did not come to school. And so we said, this is what we need to focus on to build self-esteem. In Margaret's situation,
good afternoon, brothers and sisters. We're Pauletta telling you. But Pauletta has helped a lot in my own self-esteem. Sorry. But at St. Peter Claver Primary, where I was, it was a school in the inner city. And when you talk about nothing named self-esteem, that was that school. They didn't even believe in who they were. Not even their names. They didn't like their names. They didn't like how they looked. They didn't like where they lived. They didn't like anything about themselves. And I remember one day a mother even said to me, she came big pregnant, and she had a child in grade 1. And I was by the classroom the day, just chatting with the students. And she came and I was saying, how are you? And so I just said, Lord, Miss Good, not stay good at all. I said, what happened? And she really looked well in her face. I said, what happened to you? She said, Miss Bull, this is a picture of a boy. He called all him and do Miss Bull, I just give me peer trouble every morning, me sick, every morning, me sick. And then you recognize from that day, she was already putting down this child before the child even born. And saying it's a boy, because from as a boy, nothing good now come from that. And seriously, and that was part of what was happening. The boys, the parents, them never so interested in the boys. The little girl, them pretty and them fixed up them here and then da. But the boy picked them. And so part of what we used at St. Peter Claver was music. Music. The children couldn't read, they couldn't write. But they could all sing and could all dance. And they knew the words of the songs from beginning to end. And so we used the music. Of course, them called me that I was old school, because I came with the Jimmy Cliff and the Bob Marley and the Dennis Brown and so on. And they had the newer guys, the Bounty Killers and so on, Archbishop favorite. But Anyway, anyway, we use the music. And I remember we taught them every single one of those songs that had a social message. Because these guys experienced what they are now experiencing. And I remember they knew all of Jimmy Cliff songs, all of Bob Marley. They knew them, they could sing them. And then we used them like poetry. So we had big discussions going on around the songs and what they meant and if things have changed and who is causing it. And of course, they licked down the poor politician. They licked down the poor church people. And these were these little children what everybody thought never have no sense. Them come from down south. From you come from down south. Nothing good can come from down there. And by doing that, then they said, listen, if you are going to be talking about these songs and so you have to be able to write your own then. So you have to start learning to write. And so, oh my God, I nearly mad us. And remember, I was a mathematician, so I couldn't teach to read so good. I had to go and learn how to teach reading so that I could now work with these students. The parents had to learn, so we brought in parents into reading classes. And that's just how it started. It just started that way, and that is why it's called the change from within. The change came right there from within the school. It came from within each other, and it ended up changing the entire community. Change from within. But I remember one day, we had a visit from the ministry, and at that time it was Burchell Whiteman who was the minister. And he came to school, and of course the children showing off them Bob Marley song them and everybody singing up a storm and feel good. Because that time they're full of themselves now, you know. Yeah. And I remember Burchell Whiteman went into this class, grade 5, and asked him, sing one of your songs, sing one of your songs. And you know which song they choose? Out of all of the songs they want to sing? Jah would never give the power to a ball head. No, we tell you that time they don't know when I'll be dead. Embarrassed, because of course Burchell Whiteman had ball like you. Jah would never give the power to a ball head. He wasn't himself at the time. But guess what? He had a great sense of humor. So he joined them and he sang along. But just to show you that what can come from these little students. I remember a little grade 2 student. She wrote because everybody have to write now and perform and know how to use mic and so on. And I remember this little grade 2 student, she wrote this song, this poem, and it says, my school is in the inner city, but it's not an inner city school. And for me, I've walked with those words from that day, because that's when we recognize that the change had taken place. School in the city, in the inner city, but not an inner city school with all the connotations of the inner city. Change from within. Okay.
Thanks, Margaret. I wanted to just give you a glimpse of what the methodology is. Because as I said, we started on the ground. Hillary's great father, Sir Philip Sherlock. Sir Philip at that time, and it tells you to change comes at any time in your life. Sir Philip was a very old man at the time. And Sir Philip was concerned about the levels of violence in the country. And instead of coming with something new, what he did was he searched around, because he understood, as we understand this morning, and as we have been saying over and over, that the school is the catalyst, and the early childhood area is where we start. And if we don't start, we can't finish. Right? So he began to search around for schools that were making a difference in their own little way. And he found, at the time, Margaret was at St. Peter Claver, I was at Charlie Smith, Windward Old All Age, where Mrs. and Friendship Primary in Spanish Town brought us together. And with funding again, Grace Kennedy again, with funding from Grace Kennedy, we began to run workshops. We pulled the 4 principals together and formed a circle, what we call, to this day, a circle of friends. What we were doing then was learning from each other, building capacity among ourselves. And this is something I want to throw to you this morning, teachers. We cannot do it alone. The schools that are struggling need the help of the schools that are doing well. And a major part of the change from within is that circle of friends. The circle of friends, after a while, and it still exists, it's in the School of Education. The circle of friends met each month. And what we did in those circles was to pull each other up. We shared our experiences, both professionally and personally. And it reached a stage in many years where if one school had, for example, if there was a crisis in one school, a death, anything, all of us pack up and we reach that school. Yeah. We reach that school and we grieve with that school. Support. We can't do it alone. This is the core of that project, the circle of friends. At many years later, as we evolved, many of the persons in the circle began to run workshops for the other schools. So we didn't have to bring in anybody, any fancy person. Some of the same teachers from those circles would go to another school and help to build the capacity in that school. I'm not going to take more of your time, but I just want to give you 2 examples. And before I do that, I want to point out to you that one of the arms of the project is parents. We don't do anything without pulling in the parents. And if Bobby could give you examples, how they used to walk through that community, walk into the yards, just to make the parents aware of what was happening in the schools. And that brought them into the school. We brought the people who used to sell at the gate, the vendors. They became a part of the school process. Right? So that it was an entire community. Teachers, leaders, parents, community, all wrapped up together in making the school a place where people learn. And when we say learn, I'm glad in the early presentations we focused on the human being. What are we here for? If we cannot develop our capacity to love, and Grace, that word compassion, I picked out from your presentation because I think that's a problem we are having in this country. We are lacking in compassion. We don't care for one another. And that the project built compassion into the methodology. Just 2 quick examples. And I'm going to do the rural and an urban. I said earlier on that we focused in the school that I was at on football. What we did was, football is usually not a part of the entire school curriculum. The boys go out and play Manning Cup and they win and the school feel good about it and so on. But what we did was we had the football as a part and parcel of building the capacity and the confidence of the students. So for example, the young men, no matter how gifted they were in football, they had to come up at assembly and explain to the school why it was that they thought that they could represent the school. Not because they were good in football. And from the ground there are many times when a child will put up his or her hand and say, look, that one can't represent the school. He can play, he can score a goal, but he can't represent the school. He comes to school late every morning, no? And through that, they were part and parcel of developing values. So even that young man who they felt could not make the team at that time, we then had a further discussion on what it was that young man needed to do in order to represent the school. Not rejection. We also built into that football team young people from the school who would attend the matches, and they were the ones who would determine which member of the team did not play collectively, which one got a red card, which one got a yellow card, and then they had to come to school the Monday morning and explain why they got a red card and what it did to the school. It wasn't just me that got the red card, it was the entire school that got the red card. So that kind of conversation developed. And as a matter of fact, what happened in 3 years, that football team won the Manning Cup, the Olivia Shield, the Da Costa Cup, the Walker Cup, and the most disciplined team. And when we came back to school, what the guys were focusing on was that they were the most disciplined team. Not so much the cups that they won, but that they were most disciplined coming from jungle. That was very important for them. And so you can see the confidence that was instilling in them. Then in addition to that, ISA, Inter-Secondary School Sports Association, started to say, what the heck is happening? The guys who are being chosen to represent the school in football are guys who are now doing CSEC. Never before. And many of them, on leaving school, were recruited overseas into some of the major league teams. Many of them got scholarships, football scholarships, to do academics and football, particularly in the United States. That's the first example. The last example is a rural one. A school called Treadlight. Any of you know Treadlight Primary? Treadlight is in Clarendon. When Treadlight came into the program, we visited the school. Treadlight, when we looked around, all we saw at Treadlight was land. They had a lot of land. And remember I said that what the project does is focus on what excites the children. What is it that excites them? What makes them want to move, to run, right? In the same way that they would leave school at Charles Smith and go football match, bring it into the school, but structure it. At Treadlight, many of the parents were higglers, farmers, they go into the market, they sell and so on. There were a group of boys at the time who were trans. They would stay outside of the school and do all sorts of things. And one of the things with the project too is that we focus on the positives. Focus on the positives. So you could take two ways to deal with those guys. One, you could punish them for being outside when they should be inside. Or you could try to find out, why are they outside and not inside? What is so interesting outside? Something not interesting inside. So when we checked it out, it turned out that you know what those little boys were doing? Planting, sowing seeds. That is what they knew, and that is what excited them, and that is what their parents used to do. So guess what? We transformed a classroom onto a farm. So we started, after a while, we had a thriving farm with cabbage and callaloo and carrots and anything you could think of. But between the rows of cabbages and carrots and so on were desks and benches. And those children, especially those boys, the first set of words that they learned to read was from the environment. Things to do with the environment. And at the time when we started, the reading levels, the ministry at that school reading level that's very, very low. And in a matter of, say, 5 years, they were in the 90s. Right? Because that is what interested them. In addition to that, after a while, the farm became self-sufficient, so they would feed the canteen. Then we had stewards. I remember going onto the farm one day, visiting the school, and there was this young man, little boy, who come and taking me around. So they had people know, some of them were taking people around, explaining the process from a cabbage seed to a cabbage vegetable to what goes into the pot and so on. And I remember clearly, I passed, we come from town, you know. So I come and I look and I said, oh, you know, I saw the little sprouts of things and I said, is lettuce that? And the little boy looked at me and said, hey, I must town you come from. And I mean, that to me was a sense of confidence. That he could look at me, an educator, come to visit his farm and laugh after me and say, look here, you don't know cabbage different from lettuce. You don't know seedlings, you don't know nothing, right? And even when I was leaving, he came to the window of the car and he said, cabbage and lettuce, you know. And whenever I visited the school, I always asked for him because it was a joke between the two of us. But the point is that we used what interested the young men to build their capacity, not just learning the ABCs, but to build up their confidence. And do you know, at one point, they did some research in the hotels in and around them and discovered that rabbit meat was something that the hotels were short of. And they started a rabbit farm. Then they had when they had graduation, or what you call it, they didn't call it graduation, they call it school leaving exercise. You know who would be their guest speaker? Children who graduated from that batch. Every year they would invite a child who was now in high school to speak to the children in the primary school and give them the experience that they had in that primary school. So that's just a glimpse of what the project is like. The very last thing I want to point out is that the leadership one of the things that we found when we did the research and why the project was very successful was the question of leadership. Teachers, all of us in here are leaders. Whether you're the principal, the grade supervisor, the classroom teacher, you're a leader. And what we found was that the schools that were most successful were the schools that had leaders who had a vision. They didn't just go in every day and say, well, this is what it is and this is what. They had a vision of where they wanted the school to go. And in addition to that, they were able to inject that vision into other people around them. So that the leadership is critical, absolutely critical. And I want to ask you, finally, as teachers of these young, impressionable human beings, you can't do it alone. I implore you to form groups, to form teams. Whether you want to call it circle of friends or WhatsApp group or whatever, please get together, share your experiences, build each other, and believe me, based on the experience of Margaret and myself, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. You are always going to see the benefits of that. So thank you for listening.